Ordinance providing for the submission to the qualified electors of the City of Philadelphia of an amendment to Article 9, Chapter 5 of the Philadelphia Home Rule Charter entitled Referenda Approved by the Voters by adding a new section providing that the citizens of Philadelphia call upon the Pennsylvania General Assembly and the Governor to abolish the School Reform Commission and return local control of Philadelphia's schools as proposed by a petition presented to the council and approved for submission to the electors by resolution fixing the date of a special election for such purpose, prescribing the form of ballot question to be voted on, and authorizing the appropriate officers to publish notice and to make arrangements for the special election. Resolution 140527, resolution submitting to the electors of the city an amendment to Article 9, Chapter 5 of the Philadelphia Home Rule Charter entitled Referenda Approved by the Voters by adding a new section providing that the citizens of Philadelphia call upon the Pennsylvania General Assembly and the Governor to abolish the School Reform Commission and return local control of Philadelphia schools as proposed by petition filed with the council.
Thank you. Before we get into our witnesses, any member of the committee has any statement? All right, seeing none, I have some thoughts, but I'll mix them in while with questions to the witnesses. Ms. Marconi, will you please call the first witness, please?
Hillary Leonardopoulos.
Good morning. And just for the record, anyone that has submitted written testimony, it will be the full testimony will be made part of the record. Feel free to summarize any statements. Thank you. Please proceed.
Good morning, Chairman Greenlee and members of City Council. My name is Hillary Leonardopoulos, and I'm representing the Philadelphia Federation of Teachers. On behalf of Jerry Jordan and the members we represent, we want to thank you for holding this hearing today regarding Bill number 140514 and Resolution number 140527, both introduced by Councilwoman Blackwell on June 5th. Throughout the winter, PFT members and PCAP's allies worked to collect more than 3,000 surveys of Philadelphia residents. The surveys were used to assess not only the key issues of concern regarding our schools, but also to assess how Philadelphians feel about the governance of our schools. The results of our survey were clear. Philadelphians want schools returned to local control. Of the 3,157 respondents to the question about local control, a mere 102 favored remaining with the current SRC structure, 102. Having nearly 97% of respondents give the same message is certainly a powerful statement. Parents and other Philadelphia residents are cognizant of the fact that the SRC has not done what it was brought in to do, provide support for a struggling district. The district is in worse condition today than it was upon the inception of the SRC in 2001. Month after month, community members testify in front of a disconnected and aloof body of school reform commissioners uninterested in working towards solving the real issues plaguing the school district, underfunding and lack of resources. When you have 3 members of a 5-member board appointed by a governor who has yet to step foot into a Philadelphia public school, that calls into question the true commitment of the SRC to Philadelphia's school children. Upon the release of our survey report, of which I provided copies today, the Federation and PCAPS began to work closely with the Working Families Organization to further demonstrate Philadelphians' desire to return schools to local control. In doing so, we worked together to gather more than 40,000 signatures for a ballot initiative. What started with a whisper has now turned into a full rally cry for the dissolution of the SRC. Parents and residents understand that there are many challenges facing our schools. They know that it takes more than a change in a governing body to address these issues. But they want to know that they are being heard by the men and women making decisions that impact them and their children. That's why it wasn't hard to get 3,000 Philadelphians to take our local control survey. That's why we received over 40,000 signatures on our local control petitions. And that's why when parents at Steele and Marin elementary schools, when they were finally given the opportunity, voted overwhelmingly to keep charter companies out of their schools. We recognize that the ballot initiative being put forth would be non-binding, but we also believe that the statement would be very, very powerful, that it would make legislators in Harrisburg really hear the voices of the people of Philadelphia. We appreciate Council's willingness to move this process forward expeditiously, and we thank you for allowing PFT to once again testify before this honorable body. Thank you. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your remarks. I guess, Baz, we'll get this out on the record. One of the problems I have with this, and I know you do indicate in here it's non-binding, the question as it's proposed doesn't necessarily sound, like we know as people who do this stuff every day, that that's non-binding. If you read the question, do you think the average person understands it's non-binding? And should that make a difference?
That's a good question, and I think that it's clear that the message that we have been giving folks is that it is a non-binding referendum. We have been talking to, when we collected our signatures, we repeated again and again, this is non-binding. This is not something that Philadelphia legislators are able to change. However, it can send a strong message, and no, I don't think that it should influence the process.
Mm-hmm. Now, you say on here that in the question, because I'm trying to stay to the issue itself, should the Home Rule Charter be amended to call upon the Pennsylvania General Assembly and the governor to abolish the School Reform Commission? As I understand it, is that the way the School Reform Commission would be abolished? That's not my understanding how it exactly would be done.
Our understanding is that that there are various ways that it could happen, that the SRC could vote to dissolve themselves upon being fiscally stable, and that it would take that with an amendment or revocation of Act 46, that there could be a change in the governance of the schools.
So that what you're saying is that your understanding is that by a vote of the Assembly and agreeing by the governor, that it could be abolished?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. I'm sorry. Councilwoman Tasco.
Good morning, Councilwoman.
Since the abolishment of the SRC would have to come from the state, what are your actions to get that message and to get them to take action?
That's another great question. I think that in the fall, when we started talking about this more steadily at the Federation, we wanted to ensure that we were capturing the voices of the parents of Philadelphia, and that is why we took the time to have our members survey 3,000 Philadelphia residents. So we want to make sure that the message that we're giving to Harrisburg is a message that is being talked about in the schoolyard in the morning, and is a message that parents in Philadelphia are saying. So I think that the collection of the surveys was a really good start in ensuring that what we are giving to Harrisburg is the will of the people of Philadelphia. And I think that following that, I think that the collection of the 40,000 signatures, we have been keeping legislators of the Philly delegation involved in the process throughout, letting them know what we're doing. When we had our press conference at the Federation about our surveys, we had several state representatives and senators speak and attend. And once we have this ballot initiative, I think that the message that it will send to the state is going to be a very, very strong one, and I think that it will be very hard to ignore. So we will continue to lobby at the state level, setting up our appointments and meeting and so forth, but I think that when you have this public cry from Philadelphia, which, the voices of Philadelphians are often unheard in Harrisburg, and when you have this public outcry, it will make it harder for legislators there not to listen to our efforts.
Well, you have 40,000 signatures.
Yes.
And so without making it a ballot referendum, because what you're asking is for people to confirm what they have already stated.
Sure.
That this is what they want. To take those signatures to the state and give it to those leaders would serve the same purpose. Because what we do when we, and I don't want you to think I'm not
Sure, no, I
supportive,
understand.
of what you're trying to achieve. How do you get there is, what does it do for our charter? We've started to use the charter to just be a spokesperson for what we want, but we really never get what we want, and it's not binding because it's not binding.
So I think that part of the purpose of having something on the ballot is that now that we are hoping that now that council sees, which I know that you've been hearing us testify on this for quite some time, but now that I think that a recognition by City Council that this is something that the council wants members to discuss as well, that it makes the process look more official. I think that petitions are helpful and they serve a purpose at times, but I think that there's some amount of fatigue from legislators in the Capitol saying, okay, this many people signed this. And I know 40,000 is a whole different ballgame. That's a huge number. But I think that regardless, even though it's non-binding, it still is an official proclamation. And there is no discussion about whether it's the will of the people or it's there. It's happening at the voting booth. And we are hoping also that the ballot initiative will be able to be used to bring voters to the polls in November as well, because education is the #1 issue. That is the issue. Talking about how we educate our students is the issue, and I think that when we have, I'm hoping that that is enough to bring voters to the poll, but we're hoping to augment those numbers by talking about why, about an additional issue that parents of Philadelphia school children and Philadelphia residents have on their minds, that will bring other folks to the polls as well.
The other concern I have, and I'm looking at unintended consequences.
Sure.
Because it is a political issue, and you get it before someone in Harrisburg decide, okay, why don't we just give them what they want?
Right.
And then they give you a piece of legislation that you really don't want.
Right. Right, and I think you're right.
And so, because we only have, we have, what, 25? How many members we have out of
About
25 members in the legislature out of 203.
Sure.
And the majority of them are from all over the state, and they all hate Philadelphia.
Right.
Most of them, not all of them, some of them. And so, okay, let's just see what we can do to give them what they want, and what strings do they add, and how do we make it more difficult for them to operate. So, I mean, those are things that really because that issue is a negotiated issue, and certainly having the voice of the people, but I don't know if it will flow the way you think it might.
Sure, and I think that's a risk that we'll take but we would continue to be talking to legislators in Harrisburg about this, about dissolving the SRC, and I think that how the legislation ends up looking is a different issue than whether we want to have a ballot initiative to augment our efforts with the legislators. And I understand what you're saying, and that's definitely, step by step, something that we will need to be very, very cognizant of and make sure that we are not, being duped. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. And the Councilwoman raises some questions that I kind of share the same feeling on. And first, just kind of a comment, and I'll get political here for a minute. With the governor's race on the ballot, if we need any other initiative to get people to the polls, we got a problem.
Sure.
Okay?
Sure.
Because, I mean, if the idea of Philadelphia is we don't need we don't need a change at the top. I don't know what else,
right,
other than a firebomb under them, will get them to the polls. But, and just to state on the record, my other problem, and the Councilwoman alluded to it, is, and certainly this isn't the first time we've done it, but I guess I'm having a little problem with, we're slowly turning the city charter into an opinion poll. And that concerns me. You know, I don't think that's what it was there for. And look, I've been chair of the Law and Government Committee for a while, and we passed things that had to do with Iraq and nuclear warheads and all kind of stuff. And looking back, I think that was probably, with all due respect to the sponsors, and one of them was the guy who employed me for 26 years, I think was probably a mistake. I think we started down the wrong road, in my opinion. And even though this is obviously closer to home than Iraq,
Right.
I still have some concern that we keep doing this. And this is no disrespect to 40,000 signatures.
Sure.
But it's hard for me personally to get past that, you know, what's next?
Right.
You know, and if we're doing it by signatures, and I throw this out to everybody who is here today, I mean, do we always just go by that? I mean, what if the churches all got together and wanted a ballot question
Sure.
to ban gay marriage?
Sure.
Would everybody that's here saying, you know, would you want that on the ballot? Do we keep going in that direction? And that's my concern. I don't know if you have an opinion on that, and I guess I throw it out for everybody that
Yeah.
might come up here. It's just, so it's the specific issue, and I think Councilwoman Tasco raised the concerns very well, but it's also the more broader issue of the continuing
Sure.
amendments to the charter that are non-binding, so, you know.
Okay, so you brought up two issues. The first is that if we don't get folks out to the polls for the governor's race, then we're in trouble. You're right, and I think that a lot of our canvassing and a lot of our effort on bringing the community out will be to get them out for the governor's race, but also that this ballot initiative, if it has the results of showing really what the Philadelphia residents want, that it will be a mandate for the new governor. It will be a mandate, and that it will be very hard for a governor to ignore that. And so that's sort of where we stand with that.
Can I just interrupt you on that
Okay,
a second,
sure.
though? In all reality, though, I think depending on who wins this election, it's clear, I mean, which way they're going to go. If
Right.
Governor Corbett's reelected, he's not favorable to this issue. I think if Tom Wolf is elected, it sounds very strongly in his statements during the primary that he is
Right.
favorable to a change. So, I mean, and I guess the other thing, I know you said it'll send a strong message to the legislators. It will send a strong message, I guess, to Philadelphia legislators. Do you really think it sends a strong message to a legislator from Greene County or something like that? Do you really think they...
I do. I think that, and perhaps that's my naivete, because I approach it, I'm looking at it through a different lens than you are, obviously, but I think that when you have a legislator outside of the city looking and saying, okay, well, the Philadelphians took all this time, did all this, okay, that's powerful. That's,
Okay.
and
You got more faith than I do.
Well, yes. So I'm a teacher. I have to believe these things.
Okay.
Go back and read some history.
Okay. So the other.
Yes, I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Please, go ahead.
Sorry.
Now I've forgotten what I was going to say. The driving.
You said there were
folks
two
out-
issues. I'm sorry.
Yes. I think that regarding the city charter, this was an issue of the city charter. The governance of the school was in the city charter before Act 46 came along and took over our schools to fix them. So I think that this is very, very different than another ballot referendum, which really doesn't have anything to do with the city charter. This was something that was in the charter, and we are sort of looking at it from all different angles, this being one of them.
Okay, all right. No, I appreciate what you're saying, and I'm conflicted in this too, but
No,
I just...
and I understand your reservations, and obviously we think that it is worth the effort and worth the risk and worth all of it. We wouldn't have spent 6 months working on
No, I
it if we
understand.
didn't believe in it.
I understand. I know how hard you worked on the education issues in general, and we certainly appreciate it. Before I go further, I want to recognize that Councilman Heenan, a member of the committee, is present. Also, Councilwoman Blackwell, sponsor of the bill resolution, and our majority leader, Councilman Jones, is present. Any other questions or comments for this particular witness? Councilman Good?
To say I agree with your point exactly. Truth of the matter is it's all about home rule. At the end of the day, it's not something that was just in the charter, it's something that is in the charter. So if the SRC were to do the right thing and just disband itself, we revert back to the charter, and that's what the question is asking to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councilman? Councilwoman Blackwell?
Certainly I know the minority will have its say and the majority will have its way, but I'm concerned, I don't believe this hurts in the governor's race. I want a new governor as badly as we all do. I believe that part of what we sell in our jobs is hope that we're concerned that we're doing things. I'm always for the city and council having taxing authority. That I'm for. I'm not for giving that up. But in terms of 38,000 people so far saying that they want to change, that they want a local board, I'm even for local elected, and I don't know if anybody else is there. They may want local appointment. But I believe that this may help to get people out to vote because it may show them that we are trying to do something to change things. It's not working like it is. People want to change. So I'm saying I believe that everybody in the school board should have some relationship to school children, to schools, whether you went to public school like I did when I was born in projects, or whether you have children, whatever the relationship is. I believe that people want to see a connection between schools and the people who represent the schools, the school board. And so I don't think this hurts us when it comes to governor. And in Philadelphia, we still have a whole lot of Democrats, and I just don't think that people are going to say, if they vote for this, other people won't turn out and vote. I think it motivates people to come out and vote and gives them hope that some positive change will happen. And that is why I was more than happy to introduce it. And as I said, maybe I go further than a lot of other people are in my thinking. But I wanted to certainly just put my views on the record, and certainly I respect the will of the committee.
Okay. Now, I appreciate the Councilwoman, but let me just make clear, I wasn't saying it was going to hurt turnout. I was going to say I don't see, with the importance of the governor's race, people aren't turning out for that. I don't know what else they're going to turn out for. I guess that was my point. Okay.
Thank you.
Councilman O'Brien? Thank you, Councilwoman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Echoing some of the other comments that are made here, I feel I might be stating the obvious, and that is when you look at the numbers, we're getting $2 or $3 million less from Harrisburg than we did in 2007. Having said that, we didn't create this mess. This was inflicted upon us, and I don't want to be someone who is doom and gloom, but I will say as authentically and genuinely as I possibly can, because I come from that discussion, that if we don't raise $1.5 billion this year, we're lost. We are lost. And this won't be what happens in the next few months and what happens in September. We'll be doing this every day for the next 4 years. And our ask should fundamentally be that we want a statewide funding formula. And if we don't raise the money this year in this budget that carries over to next year, then we will still be talking about how we're going to pay for it instead of what we're going to give our kids in a solid education. City Council has a responsibility, but we also have to draw a line in the sand. Accept responsibility for what we are responsible for, but also hold other people accountable. We owe that to our children. We fundamentally owe that to our children. This discussion is going to be more horrific next year if we don't fix this problem the right way. And that means that this may be a bump in the road to the people in Harrisburg, but if we don't raise $1.5 billion through Marcellus Shale, then they do a hit on Marcellus Shale, they'll come back next year and say, we can't do that because we already hit that, we can't hit them again. Well, then the only alternative is you have a PIT, personal income tax. They're the only things that can raise enough dollars to solve this problem. It is a statewide problem. In a few years ago in 2012, there were There's 500 school districts, 440 of them got increases, 60 got decreases. There's something wrong with that picture. We have to tell the truth. The story as it unfolds and the evidence of how we got here is going to continue to be brought before us, we as policymakers. And I believe my colleagues in City Council are here to tell the truth. But we have to have a unified front. And we're not going to be able to continue to raise these monies locally year after year after year. The reality is, they're in a budget crunch in Harrisburg. They have to fix it the right way. Otherwise, we're going to be here again and again and again.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Jones?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've gotten a lot of information over the last, well, it started 4 years ago when I was sitting 2 seats over with my colleague Wilson Good about what we should do. And sometimes he's a man of a few words, but very resonating words when we should have done some things that we could have done. Having said that, more recently, I've gotten a lot of information and sometimes even propaganda about what we should do. But some of the things that came out of the discussion and some good things that come out, I've never seen this much public involvement on an issue in recent years since gambling. I think it might have gone as far back as gambling. So that is a good thing. People are paying attention to the product that we produce and the way that we receive resources for the product. I think most advocates will admit, if not even, only to themselves, that this body over the last 4 years has stepped up to the plate in a major way. Some of the wisdom I got was from a Republican, and I won't name which one, but I will say when they put it in an analogy that at one point it was a compliment to education from the state's charter responsibility to do that. Somehow along the way, we've gotten the bulk of the responsibility and have stepped up in a mighty way. I've seen my colleagues take tough tax votes, and I was proud of them when they did it. Here's where we are. We are playing a very dangerous game of poker. And the unfortunate part is that we have to put our cards down first. And because people know that we have to put our cards down first, they can hold back on what they should be contributing. Hold back on what they should be contributing. And it's a clever trick that they've played for the last 5 or 6 fiscal years. And we wind up dealing with, somebody said to me that budgeting is complicated, imperfect information decided upon by often imperfect people that must do what's in the best interest of all the people. And I think that's a good way of putting it. Here's where we are, that there are 3 easy steps that Harrisburg could take. 3, very easy. Extraction tax on Marcellus Shale, number 1. A fair funding formula for cities of the first class that have issues that deal with poverty, to special needs, to those kinds of things. It could take care of this. And then at the end of the day, we could do that. So I applaud and understand why we should have it. There are some good merits as to why we should have an elected school board. I agree with my colleague that that's representative of the people. But symbolically, at the end of the day, broke is broke.
Absolutely.
Broke is broke. And if you don't have money to put in, whether it's elected body, appointed body, you wind up not having the resources to deal with our babies and their needs. So we struggle with this, and we're going to continue to struggle with it. But I do think that it is important that we continue to involve the public in this process.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time.
Ms. Marconi, our next witness, please.
Sophie Bryan.
And while Ms. Bryan's approaching, I just, obviously we can talk about, and this is for everybody, all the witnesses and people coming up, and Sophie, you and I had a conversation before. I really am trying to the issue before us today is the ballot question. And I know obviously there's, school funding and all comes into this, but I'm asking everybody to try to stick to the issue of whether there should be a question on the ballot. Ms. Bryan, your testimony will be made part of the record, but I respectfully ask that you stick to that issue. If we could have a very long hearing talking about funding for the schools and the whole issue of school district, but I would ask you just to go to the yes/no issue of whether there should be a ballot question, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Chairman Greenlee and members of the committee. I'm Sophie Bryan, the Chief of Staff for the School Reform Commission, or SRC. I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today to talk about this bill and companion resolution that together would ask Philadelphians to vote on whether the charter should be amended to add a section calling on the state to return to local control for the schools. On the issue of governance, which I think is fairly within the topic of discussion this morning, Dr. Haidt put it best when he said it doesn't matter who's in charge of the school district if there are not sufficient resources. Appreciating this, the SRC members are entirely focused right now on securing sufficient funds for the district and for all public schools in Philadelphia. The commissioners have said publicly that they will vote to put the SRC out of business once stable revenue is provided. The mechanism under state law for dissolving the SRC, as the committee talked about with the PFT, is number one, the majority of SRC members recommend dissolution, and then number two, the state secretary of education issues a declaration dissolving the SRC. At that point, governance of the district would return to the Board of Education. This form of local control, as the council members certainly know better than I do, does involve a 9-member Board of Education that's appointed by the mayor based on recommendations from a nominating panel. The charter is explicit that the board members should, quote, reflect the diversity of backgrounds, experience, and training that's representative of the city. And that includes being the parent or parents of a current or former public school student, having training or experience in the areas of business, finance, education, housing, or community areas. These are attributes that the current SRC members do possess between them. On the issue of accountability, the SRC and district are committed to being transparent about finances and activity. So in partnership with the city's open data initiative, the district's posted all of its budget information, including detail about its contracts, online in searchable, manipulable format, and detailed personnel information, including names, job titles, and salaries, is going to be released in the next several weeks. Additionally, as the council is aware, the district's subject to annual audits by the Comptroller's Office. Our most recent audit for last year was clean with no findings, and we're undergoing a 4-year audit right now by the state's Auditor General, DePasquale. The district and SRC also welcome additional council engagement on district finances. Under the charter, council already has significant oversight powers, including convening public hearings, which it does. And also, as we noted in response to budget questions, the district and SRC are opened to additional oversight mechanisms, including an accountability committee, periodic briefings, additional financial reports, and various notice provisions that were scoped out in an accountability agreement developed by the council president and the then SRC chair last year. So these tools provide council with contemporaneous access to information and the opportunity to pose questions, address concerns, and work collaboratively to solve some of the financial challenges facing the district. I will conclude my remarks then and don't want to just sort of miss this opportunity to again request that City Council please consider amending the borrowing legislation tomorrow to access an additional $28 million.
Okay.
Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. I knew you had to sneak that one in there. Okay. First, Councilman Good, then Councilwoman Tasca.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Ms. Bryan.
Good morning.
Part of our decision as a committee of council and then hopefully the full council is what we think of the governance structure. 38,000 people have already spoke and then they've posed a question to us in terms of whether we think there should be a change. Now, in terms of why we think there should be a change, you've outlined in your testimony what council already has in terms of at its disposal in terms of requests for information and the ability to hold hearings. I'm going to be very direct now. The SRC made a request to the council for funding in writing. When was that done?
I think it was, so I want to answer your question precisely. I believe that there was a request for funding in writing included both with responses to budget questions after the May budget hearing and then also in Chairman Green's letter to the council president. I believe both of those had specific requests for funding.
I'm specifically referring to Chairman Green's letter to the council president. When was that?
I believe it was transmitted on Monday, June 2nd, 3rd?
That's correct. And what did that letter say in terms of request?
The letter articulated again, as the SRC and the district publicly communicated, a request for $75 million in local funding for next year.
To be done how?
It actually did not take a position on how council could do that, but outlined a range of options, which would include either revenue reductions that would support a grant or raising tax increases as examples.
It said take it out of your budget and/or raise taxes 2% across the board. Is that correct?
It said that those were two of the mechanisms that council could pursue to support additional funding.
And that was just 2 weeks ago, 14 days.
Yes.
And the SRC has changed its position since then, hasn't it? Haven't it?
I think the SRC has identified a mechanism where council could provide additional funding that would require neither of those difficult choices, either cutting the city budget or raising taxes.
That was just 14 days ago. The SRC outlined how they wanted money.
I think the SRC...
And had since that time, within a week's time, changed its position again. So council should have a problem with that. We made a formal request in terms of information and budget saying, tell us what you want and how to get there. You sent us a formal letter in writing and then changed your mind after that. You sent us a formal letter on June 2nd and have since changed your mind. That's just wrong. And so I'll ask one last question for the record. The response in the letter was regarding the $440 million, not the 216. What portion of 216 were we supposed to put up, and where is that in writing?
We haven't sub-allocated it, Councilman.
Exactly. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I recognize Councilwoman Tasco, just for the record, what is the SRC, does the SRC have a position on whether this should move forward or not?
The SRC has not taken a position on the ballot question.
Okay, all right. Yeah, what? Then what was the point? And I'm not trying to be sarcastic, but I mean, and see, that's what I was trying to get. I'm trying to really focus, and I understand the emotion and the feeling about school funding generally. We had a finance committee hearing where you stated, and obviously anybody can come here, but I guess I'm trying to figure out what, we're trying to focus on whether council this committee should move forward a question on the ballot, and you're saying you don't have a position one way or the other on that?
Yes, because I think that as we've expressed, we appreciate, and I think that your questions elicited this already, this is a non-binding, in some ways, sort of rhetorical statement, and we're focused, the district is focused, Dr. Height is focused on securing enough funding to make sure that schools don't have additional cuts next year.
Why would you take the time? Just a point of information, with all that on your plate, why would you take the time to come here and tell us you don't have an opinion?
Because it's another opportunity to talk to the council members about the need for next year and to make the request.
But there's a phone for that. I mean, you could just pick up the phone and call.
We're happy to call too.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Tasco.
Since the state legislature and the governor state's responsible for funding public education, what is the SRC Commission doing in Harrisburg to seek more money from them?
It's a great question. So the chairman of the SRC and the commissioners and Dr. Height are lobbying aggressively in Harrisburg, and there's 3 basic mechanisms that they're pursuing. So mechanism number 1, and we know that City Council is also supportive of this, obviously, having passed the legislation locally, is the $2 a pack cigarette tax. Mechanism number 2 is to make the case, aggressively in Harrisburg that if there's additional education spending in the state budget, which could be funded, for instance, through an extraction tax, through the Medicaid reimbursement, that it be allocated to districts across the state using the charter reimbursement formula. The elimination of that line item in the budget had a disproportionate effect on districts like Philadelphia, York, Reading, Pittsburgh that have charter populations. And then number three, we really are working very hard in Harrisburg to try to maintain the $39 million in additional funding and spending flexibility that was already included in the governor's proposed budget. As the legislators in Harrisburg are considering their budget for next year, they're using as their sort of template last year's budget, and so we're trying to reinforce with them that in the governor's proposed budget, there actually was $39 million that we've assumed in our budget already and that it's essential for us to preserve.
What's the feeling of the legislature in terms of funding public education?
I think that legislators, what we're hearing is that legislators are definitely hearing from their constituents, as the PFT testified, that education is a huge issue for residents of Pennsylvania and they care deeply about it. There was news this week about, I think it was Bethlehem School District or Bethlehem Board of Education enacting a local tax increase to try to avoid cuts. So certainly places across the state are feeling the impact of the decline in funding going straight to schools over the past several years. It's a major topic of discussion.
So what happens if the scenario becomes, no, this is not for you. Thank you. That's a question for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none. Again, I appreciate you coming down, but I really am trying to keep focused on what's before us today. So I wasn't trying to, say what you should say, but I'm just trying to, and again, this is for anybody else that wants to speak to. Okay? Thank you, Ms. Bryan. Thank you for your work. Ms. Marconi, who we have next?
Katie Sipp.
Please identify yourself and proceed.
Good morning.
Morning.
And thank you for allowing me to testify today. My name is Katie Sipp, and I'm the director of Pennsylvania Working Families, a newly formed progressive organization fighting for an economy that works for all of us and a democracy where every voice matters. No Philadelphia voter was given a vote when the school district was taken over by the state. No set of voters got to weigh in on how the School Reform Commission was created, and certainly no group of voters have had the chance to reject the policies of the SRC through a democratic process. I don't think there is a single person in this room who would say that Philly's schools are in better shape than they were when Governor Corbett and his appointees assumed control. Years of draconian budget cuts from the state, coupled with questionable choices on the part of the School Reform Commission as to how the state's limited funds have been spent, have left us with schools that have to fight harder every year just to stay even. Parents, teachers, support staff, and students are doing the best they possibly can, but Governor Corbett and his allies make it harder every year. And the people in this room, frankly, are not alone in feeling disappointed at the state of the schools. Whether Philadelphians are holding bake sales to restore funding for beloved teachers, or walking out of school to protest a lack of music programs, or sitting down in the street to demand that our government pay attention, we are taking action to fix our schools. The symbolic nature of this ballot measure is powerful, just as the arrest of Andy Perez, Ron Whitehorn, and Kia Hinton, who are here in the room today, were powerful. And frankly, symbolic gestures are what we have at our disposal at the moment. We started this petition drive on Tuesday, April 8th, and all of the groups engaged were able to collect almost 40,000 signatures from registered voters in the city in 7 weeks. I know that those of you who have had to collect petition signatures for your own campaigns understand what a Herculean task that was, and what a hunger there must be in Philadelphia for real democratic control of our schools. I am joined today by many of the Canvas staff and volunteers from various organizations who worked throughout the spring to collect these petition signatures, and we are all very pleased that Council has begun the process through today's hearing to put this charter change on the ballot for Philadelphia voters in the fall. We strongly support the move to put this question on the ballot in November and urge this committee to recommend it to the full Council. Let Philadelphians vote. Let us take action at the ballot box like we've been taking it in the street, and let us send a message to legislators and the governor in Harrisburg that we won't stand for their priorities for our kids.
Just one quick question. And you've
Absolutely.
heard me have
Yes.
the discussion already, and we've talked before about
Certainly.
this feeling. Do you basically think that on any issue, if there's a required number of signatures, a question should go on a ballot? Do you think that should be, no matter what the question is?
Is this a democracy?
Yeah. Yes.
Then I believe, I mean, I'm not a lawyer. I brought one with me in case you have legal questions about our charter amendment, but it's my understanding that this is a process that is outlined, in the city charter, that citizens do have a right to put questions on the ballot. And to answer your question from earlier, or your supposition about the gay marriage, right? People who are opposed to those ballot measures have an opportunity to organize against them and to try to get people to vote them down. And I personally would certainly do that if someone in this city tried to say that, gay marriage shouldn't be legal in Philadelphia. I would work to make sure that that got voted down at the ballot, and I would suggest that people, if there are folks who want to organize to, keep this from getting approved by Philadelphia voters, they are certainly free to do that.
All right. I guess in fairness, though, just to have the record straight, it does say that these petitions would have it submitted to City Council, which it was,
Right.
and the council would consider it, which we are doing now. But it is still
Obviously, yes,
up
it is
to
the
city
right of council.
Yeah, well, you got to let me finish the sentence before
Sorry.
you tell me it's obvious. Obviously, City Council then has a decision to make. And as I've said before, I understand the argument for. I still think, in my personal opinion, that, and there's difference of opinion on this committee, that amending the city charter on a non-binding opinion I have questions about that. I understand the argument, but I also have questions about it. And that's what I was trying to raise. It has nothing to do with being a democracy. Democracy has laws. These are the laws, and we are following those laws. But part of that law is that in the end, this committee and the full council have a decision to make too. That's part of the democracy. Okay?
Absolutely. And I would, I guess to some degree, pose the question back to you. If 40,000 signatures isn't enough to trigger a ballot measure, how many do we need?
Well, I guess the question back is putting non-binding questions on the ballot to amend the charter, is that appropriate? That's the question. Obviously people feel yes, some people feel no, and that's the question. It's really not, to me, the issue of whether the SRC should be abolished. I certainly have an opinion on that myself, but it's the continuing, the continuing piece by piece, putting these charter amendments, these amendments in the charter that doesn't directly affect. And I know there's an argument that this could, at least in some ways, directly affect. So there's arguments both ways, but so it's not just about democracy and respecting democracy and respecting the 40,000 signatures. And that's why we're here. That's why we're considering it. But it is, I think in the end, too, according to the law, we have a decision in this, too. Councilwoman Tasco?
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for your testimony. The question goes on the ballot. At the end of the day, what is your next step?
The next step after the election?
After the election, what's the next step for your group? What are you expecting?
Well, I would say that to some degree, it makes what happens in the larger election will affect the strategy in both looking at what happens at the governor's race and what happens in, the control of the legislator or either body of the legislature. I wouldn't want to outline a sort of strategy without knowing for moving forward local control of the Philadelphia schools. That doesn't reflect the fact that there are two different ways that election could go. The gubernatorial election and also the strategy would change if, for example, one body of the state legislature were to change from Republican to Democratic control. So, the strategy would be to go to the state in some way, but it's going to kind of depend on what happens, what the will of the voters are in the statewide elections. Am I answering your question or not?
Well, I guess I'm asking you, if we pass this, if this goes on the ballot and it passes with whatever number of people vote, at the end of the day, what impact does that have in Harrisburg, given the makeup of the legislature and the philosophical views of the legislature? What impact does it have?
Well, as I said in my testimony, I think, sends a message that tens of thousands of Philadelphians wanted it on the ballot, and that most likely more than 100,000 Philadelphians voted for it. And I think that, to be honest, having spent the last 9 years of my life working on state-level politics, I would say there are different viewpoints from different parts of the state about whether or not Philadelphia should have local control of its schools. And there are, in some ways unlikely or possibly unlikely allies that we could find about moving that through the legislature as well. And working with a new governor, theoretically, and a new Secretary of Education, theoretically, we might have a different path to take to get to local control through that process as well.
With only, out of the 203 legislators, 25 are from Philadelphia.
In the House,
the rest in the House represent.
Right, but the issue
across none of the people in Philadelphia who are voting for on the referendum will impact any of those legislators outside of Philadelphia. They don't vote for them.
But other school districts in other parts of the state have been taken over. And the legislators who represent those school districts sometimes are not very happy about it either.
Happy about?
The fact that their school districts...
Well, have you all mounted a collaborative effort across the state with other school districts to have, can they put a binding, non-binding resolution on their ballot? So if there's a broader effort other than just Philadelphia, across the state sends a stronger message than just Philadelphia, because they say, it's Philadelphia, and we don't really have to listen.
Right.
They don't listen to us anyway. But a broader coalition of people doing the same kind of thing. Now, if you don't get the governor that you like, it doesn't mean anything. And the governor that you might want already is committed to something. So, but I'm not criticizing you for doing it. I did this to myself. I was, in 1971, was recalling my council member who I didn't even know because they didn't fund public education, along with Americans for Democratic Action. So, it's been a turmoil ever since I can remember, the whole issue around public school funding. But if you're going to impact the legislature on anything, the state legislature, you've got to have a broader coalition.
Absolutely, I totally agree. I'm not aware of there being a binding referendum process in most other localities in the state of Pennsylvania, but we are looking at other ways of engaging voters in other municipalities where the schools have been taken over.
Okay, thank you, Councilwoman. I have one more question, but first, Councilman Good.
Yeah, just questions for the record. I think the ballot question is clear, but I want to bring some more clarity for the record. You're not suggesting a different governance structure for the school district. You're simply suggesting that the School Reform Commission be abolished and returned to local control.
That is correct.
And so essentially what you're saying is revert back to the Home Rule Charter.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just one question. I don't know if you folks can answer this, or maybe as a subsequent witness. Just say that this ballot question gets on, passes, and I think if it gets on, it's going to pass. What changes at that moment? Because I assume my understanding, and I could be wrong on this, the whole issue is if the school district is still in distress, financial distress. I mean, obviously that isn't likely to change right after November, whatever it is, 5th, 6th. So what, I guess, substantive changes happen right after that? I mean, it would still stay in the same position, right?
Right, absolutely. I mean, we don't have the ability to affect
Right.
the makeup of the SR, or the existence of the SRC through this process. I don't think anyone is asserting that.
Okay, all right. Any other questions or comments? Oh, Councilwoman? Or you
No, I'm
finished?
sorry.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you both.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Marconi, our next one.
Ellen Kaplan.
Yeah, sure. Ms. Kaplan, I repeat what I repeat to other people. If you could keep your testimony to specifically whether there should be a ballot question, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
I will. Absolutely. Good morning. I'm Ellen Madelman Kaplan. I'm the Vice President and Policy Director of the Committee of 70. I'm here to urge this committee not to put this question on the November ballot. And I'm going to...
Whoa. Excuse me, Ms. Kaplan. I think democracy was mentioned here before. All right? So it just doesn't have to do with people you agree with, okay? That's democracy. All right? Excuse me. Ms. Kaplan, please.
Thank you, Councilman Greenlee. The Committee of 70 shares your concern about ballot questions that are non-binding going into the Home Rule Charter. And I think you brought up the best example of that, which was the ballot question that passed calling on the President and the U.S. Congress to remove the troops from Iraq. That's not what the Charter is about. And to clog up the Charter with non-binding expressions of the sentiments of Philadelphians is not the purpose of the Charter. I agree that the issue of public school governance is a Charter question. I don't think we're there yet. And I fear, incidentally, another issue that you raise, which is, will the average person understand this? I don't believe that members of the public should be deluded into thinking, as I am concerned that many will, that putting it on the ballot means that the school district's governance will change. It will not. The way that it will change is if the Secretary of Education files a declaration upon the request of a majority of the 5 members of the School Reform Commission, and that's something that is in the governor's control, because it's going to be either Tom Wolf or Tom Corbett's appointment for the Secretary of Education, and incidentally, of course, it's not that the 3 governor-controlled members' terms are coterminous with the governor. Some of those terms are going to continue. So I think that is the process. Now, I am not unsympathetic with the sentiments expressed in the petition, because the Committee of 72 believes that optimally the schools should be controlled locally and not by state government. But the question is, should a non-binding question that will have no effect whatsoever go on a ballot? And I'm here to say it should not.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Kaplan. Appreciate your comments. Councilman Kenny?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just curious, how long have you been with this Committee of 70?
Since 2005.
So that was before or after the takeover by Act 46?
Zach, if you're asking when Zach came in February 2005, and I came in April 2005.
I'm trying to remember the date of Act 46 passage. What year was it? 2? 1?
Oh, the takeover was 2001.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Councilman Good?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Ms. Kaplan. Did you write your own testimony?
Did I write it? Yes.
Did you consult with anyone?
I always consult with Zach Stolberg when we're writing testimony.
Okay, did anyone other than the two of you contribute to your testimony?
Pardon me?
Did anyone other than the two of you contribute to your testimony?
No.
So it represents two opinions.
It represents the it represents the opinion of the policy director and the CEO, and also, just so you understand, that we, Zach and I, testify, we make statements based on what we believe are the sentiments of the board of the Committee of 70.
So how many people does that represent?
At this point, I'd have to count. I can get you an exact count, maybe about 60.
Okay. So you disagree with 38,000 people?
I disagree.
You disagree with 38,000 people?
With
38,000 people.
I don't disagree on the sentiment. I disagree that it should be on the ballot, which is why we're here. And incidentally,
My question is, you disagree with 38,000 people about whether it should be on the ballot?
I actually believe, and I don't mean to speak for them, I believe that they want local control. I think if they thought they could do it by any other way,
You've made it very clear that you speak for yourself, you speak along with Zach Stahlberg.
And represent the board of the Committee of 70.
And represent no more than 60 people.
That's correct.
So you disagree with 38,000 people about whether it should go on the ballot?
Yes.
Okay. And so you think your opinion matters more than 38,000 people?
No, I don't think it matters more than 38,000 people, but I believe that the 38,000 people want local control. I think the question is, do they really want it on a ballot? I don't know the answer to that.
So you do believe that you could benefit from learning the opinion of those 38,000 people?
I do, and that's why actually I have said in our testimony that City Council and the mayor could do what you did with the task force on
I'm not talking about task force. I said, do you believe that you could benefit from learning the opinion of those 38,000 people?
I believe I know their opinion.
You believe you know their opinion?
About whether the school should return to local control? I think I do.
But you don't believe they think it should be on the ballot and they should get a chance to vote for it?
I believe that it's this council's responsibility to protect the
Okay,
charter
wait.
against meaningless, non-binding referendums.
I'm going to ask you two more questions. One, don't you think that the ballot question suggests that we revert back to the Home Rule Charter and that has meaning?
I don't believe it needs to be accomplished through a ballot question. City Council could pass a resolution, as you did with Citizens United.
Okay. Well, 38,000 people disagree with you, and your opinion is not worth more than that. Thank you.
Okay.
Councilwoman Tasca?
Good morning, how are you?
Good morning.
As you said earlier, you and Zach make a lot of statements. And you have a board of 60 members. How do you gauge their opinion about what you say? So do you think they believe what you are commenting on, or have you taken a poll, or have you had a meeting and had a discussion? What do they think about public education? What do they think about the issue? Or you and Zach just decide, well, I think they believe this, and we're going to say it.
Well, in the case of public education, we actually had a committee on education, which is a policy committee, which is one of the committees that I oversee. We interviewed a lot of people, former superintendents, Arlene Ackerman when she was the superintendent, Dr. Height, and a number of people in an effort to figure out where the Committee of 70 could play a meaningful role in public education. So I believe on this issue, I do know the sentiments of the board. I talked to many board members during the week, as does Zach. We have many meetings, and I think if we had to actually check in with our board members on every single issue, we wouldn't be able to say anything because there's 60 of them. So I think that in 95% of the cases, we know where our board stands, and they have given us the freedom to talk, and that's how it works.
Yeah. Hasn't been very effective either.
Pardon me?
It hasn't been very effective.
Well,
either.
I know that you feel that way, Councilwoman, and I appreciate that you pick up the phone and argue with me. I've said that to you in the past as opposed to not
But there are a
talking to
lot of
me at all.
people. There are a lot of people who read your opinions, and some believe that your word is the last word. And I think that if you have 60 members, there ought to be some way to gauge their thinking on this issue. And so I'll just stop there because you know how I feel about the Committee of 70. It's not very good. So I'll stop there.
No,
Thank
I
you.
certainly do. And Councilman Greenlee, I just wanted to add what I have in my written testimony, which is that if the governance of the school district is to change, and certainly it could, we all know where Tom Wolf is on local control, he favors it, that there could be a task force that was put together by council and the mayor. You did it with the task force on ethics and campaign finance reform in 2009. It yielded a number of reforms. Louisiana did it. I gave you some information on that in my testimony. It included a lot of stakeholders, including local and state government officials, union members, principals, parents, so that there could be a collective determination of what we want local control to look like. It doesn't have to be the way it is in the charter. That is the way it happened in the past, and I know this, as you all know from personal knowledge, because my own father was the member and president of the Philadelphia School Board in the 1980s. But that doesn't mean that we should have a mayoral appointed school board. Maybe city council should get confirmation power. Maybe it should be elected. Maybe it should be elected with taxing authority. Maybe the school district should be broken out into different governance units. There are a lot of options, and I think it would benefit the 38,000 people and everybody else if we knew exactly what we wanted the governance of the schools to look like when we return to local control.
Councilman Good. I was going to say you might quit while you're ahead. Councilman Good.
Ms. Kaplan, where does the governance structure come from in the charter currently?
Pardon me?
Where does the governance structure come from in the charter currently?
For the schools, it has been in the past in the city charter. And I'm not saying it doesn't belong there. It does. It's just...
So where did it come from, the current structure within the charter?
The current structure? No, it comes from the state. And the State Enabling Act says how the SRC should be dissolved.
No. Where does the current structure related to the school board come from in the charter?
Well, the old system by Article 10 of the charter, I believe. It's Article 10.
I'm sorry to hear you.
I believe it's in Article 10 of the charter.
Let me
The
ask
old
you.
structure.
No, there's a new structure.
The SRC structure?
No, there's a new structure that was put in place in 1999.
Well, I think once we decide where it works, then you could go in the charter. We don't know what we want to return to.
I'm asking the questions, you're answering the questions, okay? It went in 1999. It was a charter amendment sponsored by then Councilman Nutter. So how did it get into the charter? People voted for it. So the people actually approved the governance structure that's in the charter now in 1999. Then state law took it away. If the people want to take it back, they have a right to do that. Because that's the structure they approved.
With all due respect, people, that was a long time ago, and now people may have a different opinion after the state takeover.
You've sat here and you've defended a charter from the 1950s, but that action that people took creating this current structure happened in 1999, which is not that long ago. Thank you.
Well, it was long enough ago, and it was before the state takeover. And the question is, again,
The question is whether we should revert back to the charter. That's the question.
Should it revert back to the charter?
Should we revert back to home rule? That's the question. This is a home rule city. It should be a home rule city. We should revert back to home rule. We should control the school district ourselves.
Well, I suggest that since you can't...
And the people set up a structure for that through democracy in 1999, are trying to set up a structure for that right now. Thank you for your testimony.
With all due respect, I don't think that... Do you think that With all due respect, do you think that passing the ballot question is a step in that direction?
I absolutely believe that it's making a statement that we want to revert back to home rule. It's a simple statement. It's a powerful statement. It's the right statement. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Ms. Kaplan? Seeing none, thank you. Thank you. Ms. Marconi, who? Come on now, folks, really.
Kia Hinton Philpott.
If I could just ask, I think that's all we have on our list. Is there anyone else here that wants to testify? Okay, after Ms. Philpott, that will conclude the testimony. Good morning. Please identify yourself for record and proceed.
Good morning. My name is Kia Hinton Philpott. I'm a member of Action United. Sorry. So far, the decisions of the SRC has not improved education for all students. What I've seen in this city is two educational systems created. One that is supported by the governor and SRC, which would be the charter system, while public schools are stripped of all resources. This expansion of charter schools is not the answer to our educational problems. In fact, the expansion of charter schools and an SRC that is not accountable to anyone aside from who appoints them does not help the vulnerable students and families from my community. Of course, we need more money along with a fair funding formula to allocate dollars, but with an SRC who, again, is accountable to no one in my community, has the ability to continue to underfund our neighborhood schools. The parents I've talked to recognize that charters are doing better than public, but also recognize that it's not a choice afforded to all families and students. The expansion of charter schools has been prioritized over the ability of Philadelphia public school students to even have access to the most basic educational resources, in part due to the decisions of the SRC, who has no accountability to the people most affected. I was reading this book, and I recently read that after the 1831 rebellion led by Nat Turner, he was an educated slave and the leader of the Nat Turner Rebellion, the stronger laws were passed that made it a criminal act to educate slaves. And then a Virginia legislator went so far as to declare, "We have closed every avenue by which light might enter their minds. If you could extinguish the capacity to see the light, our work would be completed. They would then be on a level with beasts of the field, and we would be safe." And so that quote made me think of the many underfunded schools, the lack of staff, and the violence that has erupted in our schools, in particular Bartram High School that's in my neighborhood. The decisions of the SRC has extinguished the light for far too many. So this is why I support putting the SRC to bring back local control on the ballot. And we really need that. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Is there any questions for this witness? Nope. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
There was no one else on the list to testify. Is there anyone else that needs to testify? Seeing none, we will Councilman Jones. I'm sorry, you were pointing.
Talking to someone else. Okay. I'm sorry, Mr.
All right. Well, thank you very much. That'll conclude our public hearing. We'll take a short break till the chairman. Oh, he's back. We will soon go into our public meeting.
right, excuse me. Excuse me. Can I just have your attention for 1 minute? We are now in the public meeting of the Committee on Law and Government. Before I recognize Kenny for the Councilman Kenny for the for the motions, let me just state for the record. This is just my personal opinion. If anybody else has one, I would support at this present time, in due respect to the 38,000 plus that signed this petition, to move this out of committee today. And next thing I say, you're probably not going to applaud. It would be my recommendation that we do it with no recommendation, and but that we still move it forward, that it could be considered by the full council in September. I've stated my concerns about this, and I certainly respect other people's different opinion on this, but I still have concerns about continuing to put non-binding amendments into the city charter. I think Councilman Good is right. We're way, way closer to this being directly related to the Home Rule Charter than the war in Iraq or nuclear warheads are. But I still have some concerns. So I want it just noted for the record, and I probably should not say this and keep everybody happy, but I want to note it for the record that moving this forward, for me, does not assume that I'll be voting for it in September. I'm still weighing that, and again, that's just me. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, Chair recognizes Councilman Kenny.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that we accept the amendment to Bill number 140514.
Wait a minute. Oh, I'm sorry.
The amendment. The
amendment, yes.
The amendment to the ordinance.
It's been moved and seconded. The amendment be approved. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the amendment is adopted. Councilman Kenny.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that Bill number 140514 as amended be reported out of this committee with no recommendation.
And a rule suspension.
And a rule suspension allowed for first reading at our next council session.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, Bill number 140514 as amended is reported out of this committee with no recommendation and a rule suspension to allow for first reading at our next session of council. Councilman Kenny?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the council approve resolution number 140527 to move it to the full council.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, resolution number 140527 is reported out as committee with a favorable recommendation.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. I said that wrong. Moved out.
No recommendation.
I'm sorry. Let me amend that. Resolution 140527 is recommended out of this. It's moved out of this committee with no recommendation.
We don't need to suspend.
No, we don't need a suspension of rules. If I haven't further confused people, that concludes our Law and Government Committee today. Thank you all for your participation.